Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Listen Easy English. It is wonderful to have you here with us today. Let's take a deep breath together and get ready to travel back in time. We will dive deep into the life of one of history's most fascinating figures, Napoleon Bonaparte. Imagine you are standing on a cold, quiet hill in Europe. The wind is soft and the sky is gray. In front of you, a young man looks out at the world. He is not very tall. He does not look like a powerful king or a mighty warrior. But inside his mind, there is a fire burning. He has a dream. He has a question that will change history forever. Who is this man? And how did a boy from a small, unknown island become one of the most famous people who ever lived? Stay with me, because today we are going to explore the incredible life of Napoleon Bonaparte, a life filled with ambition, power, and lessons for all of us. Our story begins on a small island called Corsica, located in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. The year was 1769. Napoleon was born into a family that was not rich or famous. His father, Carlo, was a lawyer, and his mother, Letigia, was a very strong and serious woman. She taught her children that life is hard and that you must fight for what you want. Napoleon was the second of 8 children. His family was proud, but they were not wealthy. Life in Corsica was simple, and the people worked hard to survive. Even as a child, Napoleon showed signs of being different. While the other children played games outside, young Napoleon was serious. He was quiet and focused on his studies. He loved to read books about history, great leaders, and famous battles. Even as a child, his mind was always moving, always thinking, and always dreaming of something bigger than his small island home. Napoleon often imagined himself as a great leader. He was fascinated by the idea of power and leadership. He dreamed of being someone who could change the world. This dream would follow him throughout his life. As a child, Napoleon was not just interested in stories of kings and battles. He was fascinated by the idea of power and leadership. He often imagined himself as a great leader, someone who could change the world. This dream would follow him throughout his life. When Napoleon was just 9 years old, his father made a life-changing decision. He sent Napoleon to France to attend a military school. This was a huge journey for a young boy. France was a powerful, rich, and busy country. It was very different from the quiet life on Corsica. For Napoleon, this new life was difficult. He was an outsider. He spoke French with a strong Corsican accent, and the other boys at the school laughed at him. They teased him because he was not really French. They made him feel lonely and different. But Napoleon did not cry, and he did not give up. Instead, he used his loneliness to focus. He studied harder than anyone else. He became excellent at mathematics, geography, and history. He read every book he could find. Slowly, his hard work turned into something new: confidence. He realized that being different was not a weakness, it was a strength. He was not the most popular boy, but he was the most determined. When he graduated from military school in Paris at age 16, he was ready to become a soldier. He was ready to begin his journey. The time Napoleon spent in military school was not easy. He often felt alone and struggled to fit in with the other boys. While they played together and formed friendships, Napoleon focused on his studies. He pushed himself to excel in everything he did, knowing that education was his path to a better future. During this time, he developed a love for reading about military strategies and famous battles. He read about great leaders like Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great, who had changed the course of history. Napoleon was inspired by their stories and wanted to be like them. He wanted to be a leader who would be remembered forever. Despite the hardships, Napoleon learned valuable lessons in resilience and determination. He learned that hard work and dedication could lead to success. These lessons would serve him well in the future as he faced even greater challenges on his path to greatness. But the world he was entering was about to change forever. It was the late 1780s, and France was in trouble. The poor people were hungry and angry. They had no money, while the king and the rich people lived in beautiful palaces and ate the finest food. The people shouted, "This is not fair." In 1789, the French Revolution began. It was a time of great chaos, fear, and change. The old world was falling apart. In the middle of this confusion, a young soldier named Napoleon began to rise. He was brave, smart, and quick to make decisions. He understood that, in times of change, the people who act fast and think clearly are the ones who succeed. Napoleon fought in many battles and showed great skill. He inspired his soldiers, and people began to notice him. At the age of 24, he became a general. To be a general at 24 is almost impossible. But Napoleon did it. The lonely boy from Corsica, the outsider who was laughed at in school, was now one of the most important military leaders in France. The French Revolution was a major turning point in French history. It was a time when the common people rose up against the king and the nobility. They were tired of being treated unfairly and wanted a say in how their country was run. The revolution was filled with passion, violence, and hope. Napoleon saw the opportunities that the chaos of the revolution created. Many leaders were confused and unsure of what to do. The old ways of governing were crumbling, and new ideas were emerging. People were excited about the possibility of change. They wanted freedom, equality, and justice. Napoleon understood this desire and used it to his advantage. But Napoleon was not finished. He wanted to know, how far can one person go? The years passed, and Napoleon won battle after battle. He fought in Italy and Egypt. He became a hero to the French people. They trusted him. In 1799, he made a bold move and took control of the French government. It was fast and calculated. Napoleon was now the leader of France. The people were excited about his leadership because they felt he could bring stability and strength to their country. Napoleon's rise to power came through a coup d'état, a sudden and illegal takeover of the government. With a group of loyal supporters, he staged a coup in November 1799. They took over key government buildings and forced the existing leaders to resign. Napoleon quickly established himself as the first consul, giving him significant power over the country. This was a risky move, but it worked. The people of France were tired of chaos and wanted strong leadership. Napoleon promised to restore order and bring stability to the nation. He was charismatic and persuasive, and many people believed in him. They hoped he would bring an end to the violence of the revolution. A few years later, in 1804, he did something that shocked the world. In the great cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, there was a beautiful ceremony. Napoleon stood before the most powerful people, generals, politicians, and kings. He took a crown and placed it on his own head. He did not wait for anyone else to crown him. He was now Napoleon I, Emperor of France. This was a significant moment in history. It showed that he believed he could create his own destiny. He had built an empire. He changed laws, created new systems, built roads, and opened schools. He brought order to a country that had been in chaos. Many people respected him, and some feared him. But Napoleon was never satisfied. He always wanted more. Napoleon's ambition knew no bounds. He wanted to expand his empire and make France the most powerful nation in Europe. He believed that he was destined for greatness and that his name would be remembered for generations to come. His military campaigns were impressive. He led his armies across Europe, winning battle after battle. He was a brilliant strategist and knew how to use his resources effectively. Napoleon understood the importance of speed and surprise in warfare. He would often move his troops quickly, catching his enemies off guard. The wars he fought became known as the Napoleonic Wars. They involved many countries, including Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Napoleon's army was strong, and he achieved many victories. His soldiers admired him and followed him without question. They believed in him and his vision for France. However, as his power grew, so did his enemies. Other nations began to fear Napoleon's ambition. They formed coalitions against him, uniting to stop his expansion. The balance of power in Europe was at stake, and many leaders were determined to bring an end to his reign. In 1812, he made the biggest mistake of his life. He decided to invade Russia. Russia is a massive country with a very harsh climate. Napoleon took an army of more than 600,000 soldiers, the largest army in European history at that time, to the east. At first, the Russian army did not fight back directly. They retreated, moving deeper into their own country. As they moved, they burned their own villages and crops. They left nothing for Napoleon's army to eat or use. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, the city was empty. Then, the winter arrived. The Russian winter is famous for being incredibly cold. It was a cold beyond imagination. Napoleon's soldiers did not die from fighting. They died from the freezing temperatures, from lack of food, and from exhaustion. Napoleon had to retreat. This retreat was one of the saddest events in history. More than half of his army did not make it home. The retreat from Russia was brutal. The soldiers faced extreme cold, hunger, and fatigue. Many soldiers died from the harsh conditions. Those who survived faced constant attacks from Russian forces. The once mighty army that had marched into Russia was now in disarray, with soldiers fleeing and losing hope. Napoleon himself struggled during this retreat. He had to confront the reality of his failure. He had believed he could conquer Russia and expand his empire, but now he was watching his dreams crumble. It was a humbling experience, and it changed him. After the failure in Russia, things moved very quickly. The countries of Europe, England, Prussia, Austria, and Russia joined forces against him. Napoleon fought back, but he was tired, and his army was weak. In 1814, his enemies entered Paris. For the first time in his life, Napoleon had no choice. He gave up his power. He was sent away to a small island called Elba in the Mediterranean Sea. It was not so different from the island where he was born. Life on Elba was a significant change for Napoleon. He had been the most powerful man in France, and now he was living in exile on a small island. However, he did not sit idle. Even in exile, Napoleon was filled with ambition. He began to plan his return to power. He was not alone on Elba. He had a small group of loyal supporters who believed in him. They helped him organize his thoughts and strategies. Napoleon spent his time thinking about how he could escape and reclaim his position as the leader of France. He was determined to return. But Napoleon was not a man who could rest for long. Just 10 months later, he escaped from Elba and returned to France. The French people welcomed him back, and even the soldiers sent to stop him joined his side instead. It seemed, for a short time, that his story might continue. During this time, Napoleon was filled with hope and ambition once again. He began to plan his return to power, gathering supporters and building an army. He believed that he could reclaim his place as the leader of France and restore his empire to its former glory. Napoleon's return became known as the 100 Days. He quickly gathered supporters and regained control of Paris. The people were excited to see him again. They remembered the glory days of his rule and hoped he could bring back stability and strength to France. However, his return was met with mixed feelings across Europe. Other nations were alarmed at the prospect of Napoleon regaining power. They feared that he would start another series of wars to expand his empire. The leaders of Europe began to prepare for conflict. In June 1815, Napoleon faced his final challenge at the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium. This battle would determine his fate and the future of Europe. The opposing forces, led by the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian general Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher, united against him. The battle was intense and chaotic. Napoleon had hoped to catch his enemies off guard, but they were ready for him. The fighting was brutal, with thousands of soldiers on both sides. In the end, Napoleon's forces were defeated. The once great leader found himself on the losing side, and his dreams began to fade once more. After the defeat at Waterloo, Napoleon's fate was sealed. He was captured and faced the reality of his situation. The leaders of Europe decided that they could not allow him to return to power again. They sent him far away to a tiny, remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean called St. Helena. He would never leave that island again. Napoleon lived on St. Helena for 6 years. It was a lonely existence. He had been the Emperor of France, and now he was a prisoner. He spent his days reflecting on his life and his choices. He wrote his memoirs, sharing his thoughts and experiences. In his writings, he expressed his desire to be remembered as a great leader. Although he was in exile, Napoleon remained influential. His ideas continued to inspire people around the world. He had changed the course of history, and people were fascinated by his life story. During his time on St. Helena, Napoleon's health began to decline. He suffered from various ailments and struggled with depression. The isolation of the island weighed heavily on him. He missed the power and prestige he once had. Despite his declining health, he continued to engage with those around him. He spoke with his guards and visitors, sharing stories of his past and discussing his visions for the future. He remained a captivating figure, even in exile. In 1821, at the age of 51, Napoleon Bonaparte died. The boy from Corsica, the outsider, the general, and the emperor was gone. His life was filled with triumph and tragedy. He had risen from obscurity to become one of the most powerful men in the world, only to fall from grace and live in exile for his final years. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte teaches us about ambition, power, and the consequences of our choices. He was not a perfect man. He made terrible mistakes, and he caused great suffering. Wars are never simple, and his story is full of both pain and greatness. But there is something in his journey that speaks to all of us. He was an outsider. He was laughed at. He spoke with the wrong accent. He came from the wrong place. And yet, he refused to accept that the world had already decided his future. He studied. He worked. He believed that knowledge and effort could change a life, and they did. Not perfectly and not without cost, but they changed his life in a powerful way. And here you are, my friend. This is Listen Easy English. If this story moved you, or if it helped you learn something today, please come back. There are many more journeys waiting for you here. Leave a comment and tell me, What did you feel during Napoleon's story? I would love to hear your voice. Until next time, my friends, take care of yourselves and never stop learning.